Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Swedlow. This is the Swedlow Show and on TELEVISIONATION. And I'm really excited to welcome, someone I always love talking with. I'm excited he'll be at TVOT NYC coming up very soon on December 3rd. The great George Ivie, who has been the center of media and measurement for 25 years, steering the MRC through seismic changes. And we're going to talk about what those are and what's going on there. But I really want to diver. I want to deeper into the subject because you do a lot of interviews, but I'm hoping that we can get into some interesting topics maybe you haven't discussed as much. So welcome to the show, George.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And the deeper and more unusual it is, the better we'll like it. So let's go for it.
Well, before I launch into my first question, which is just based on my own viewing habits, I wanted to say, congratulations on being there for so long and for being one of the only people I think in the industry that people feel relaxed around or trusted, or, maybe not relaxed, but, there's trust associated with what you do. And people don't feel, that as partisanship. Would you say that's true?
Gosh, I hope so. We don't represent any side of this equation, buy or sell or big platforms or TV networks or whatever it is. We're in the middle of it all, just trying to sort through the measurement in a neutral way. When I say we, because I'm just a little piece of this, but there are a bunch of other people at the MRC, and they're all the members at the MRC that work very hard to do that. So I think impartiality is neutrality, and fairness is really what we seek. So I'm glad that kind of comes through at times.
How big is the team, actually?
We have 7 people at MRC. 2 are admins, and then the rest focus on our research and standard setting function, auditing functions. So we're a small team. When I first came to MRC, there were only 2 of us, me and a fellow named Dick Weinstein. And, in terms of growth, that's actually significant growth for us. And because we have a horrible funding model, Tracy, we don't make any money on audits. I have audits coming out of my ears, coming at me from all kinds of countries and everywhere. But I don't make any money on an audit. Yeah, my sole source of funding is membership dues from the organizations that are members, and we have 170 members of the MRC that use and rely on research and rely on our regulatory function.
Well, let's actually talk about membership. That was definitely on my list here. So, as all of these members have competing interests across advertisers, agencies, networks, vendors. So, how do you balance those forces when their incentives are at odds?
Very good question. Well, we have informal ways of doing it and we have formal ways of doing it. The informal ways are that, we ask our members to kind of leave their business interests at the door and really focus when they're in an MRC forum on the merit of the research and the compliance with standards as demonstrated through the audit. We also have a bunch of neutral benchmarks to use as guideposts for that for our members. So, for example, there's a CPA audit with an opinion about compliance. So that's totally neutral. The CPAs are independent. They don't work for a buyer or a seller. They go in to a measurement service, they audit them and determine based on their testing and evidence whether the service is in compliance. That's all communicated to the audit committee. On top of that is the independent recommendation of the MRC staff. So I just mentioned we have 5 people at the MRC staff that just focus on what we do. We don't work for any media company. All we do is look at audits, standards, ensure compliance, and make recommendations to these audit committees about whether we think the service is in compliance or not. And the audit committee takes that into consideration and then layers on top of it their view of the product. That's why we call it accreditation, not certification. It might seem like a small distinction, but it's not the CPAs certifying. It's a layer above the CPAs, the users and the independent MRC staff executing that certification process. So all those are more informal ways of instructing the committee, kind of like a judge instructs a jury. We have formal ways. So another formal way is we have voting policies and procedures. And for example, it's little known to the outside world. You said we're getting into things different, but I'll tell you. We have a policy within our voting policy that says if in a vote, certain sides of that vote within our membership are diametrically opposed, we have to stop the vote and reassess the motion and the MRC's action. So I'll give you a tangible example. We're auditing a measurement service, Google something, and the buy side says they love it, and the sell side all votes against it. From an accreditation standpoint, we have to raise our hand and say that can't stand. We have to recast another motion, another action, another conclusion, which derives a greater consensus, a cleaner consensus among our membership. And in my tenure at MRC, that's actually happened several times. It's not apparent to the outside world, because nobody sees that inside baseball except us and our members. But it does happen. So we have those kinds of rules. We have influence rules. We have a voluntary code of conduct that tells how everybody should behave. In there is a conflict of interest policy, which we remind our members about. So and that's all formal. So we have all that within MRC to help protect the sanctity, really, of the decision-making, the fairness and neutrality. The last thing I'll say, Tracy, we have 170 members of the MRC from all walks of the industry. Probably our largest committee today is our digital committee. We have almost, a lot of members of the MRC are members of the digital committee, but they come from all walks of life. And it's very hard. Not all of them care about every audit. So if I convene an audit of Google Ad Manager, a lot of members come. But if I convene an audit of Extreme Reach, more different members come. If I convene an audit of Freewheel, different members come. When accreditation is decided at MRC, this is probably the most important thing. It's always ratified by the entire board. And the entire board includes a bunch of people that care about, let's just say, Freewheel, but it also includes a bunch of people that are very dispassionate about Freewheel. They don't use it. So it ends up being a very neutral assessment of compliance as it works up through the MRC and the approval processes. So all of that conspires. We make excellent decisions at MRC. I can tell you, I've been associated with MRC since 1984. And the decisions coming out of our organization are very clean. They're very good because they're based on all these processes and large consensuses that are derived.
In the voting process, aren't there people who might have a conflict or, with what's being voted on, or do they have to recuse themselves? How does that?
If they have a conflict, that's
like who's on the board? Who is on the board when these decisions get made?
Each member of our organization has a seat on the board. So I have the biggest board you've ever seen. It's got 170 members. So,
I wouldn't want to manage those board dinners that type.
The board is difficult to manage of MRC. But the bottom line is each member organization assigns a rep to the board. So, we have NBC has, another thing we should talk about is the way MRC membership works is it's by brand identity. So there's NBC, NBC owns Telemundo. They could have a seat. ABC owns a whole slew of cable organizations. They can have seats on the board for voting purposes, but no board entity, no holding company entity can have more than 6 votes on the board of 170 votes. So it's very diluted. No one company can influence us. But basically, every identity assigns a rep to our board, and that's the voting rep. And they're usually very senior researchers. If an organization doesn't have like heavy researchers, they might be sales executives, people that are into buying and selling advertising. And they do bring, it's hard. Some of them don't like products, like they use products and they don't believe in them. And so they come to the table, and it can get difficult to divorce your business interest from your voting. But what I just described to you, the size of it, the policies, the procedures, it really renders anything like that sort of neutral, because it only happens for one person or 5 people, and you're talking about 170 seats, so it's all diluted.
How educated are all those people on the thing that's being voted upon if they don't use it themselves? I mean, don't
They
they
get
have to
educated. That's a very good question. So here's how it works. The audit committee that's interested in that product, it's a self-selecting group among MRCs. So when I say I'm auditing the Nielsen National Service, all our members who are interested in that, they don't have to be a user, but they could be interested in that. They volunteer for that audit committee. The vast majority of them are users. 99% of them are users. But they then get exposed to the audit report itself, which is a voluminous document, documents testing and finding. They have to come to a meeting of the CPAs where they recite the audit process, the findings, and everything. They can ask questions. And to vote on that initial accreditation, you have to attend that meeting, and you have to hear from the neutral CPAs. So at the audit committee level, and these are very experienced people typically, they didn't just walk off the street. They have to go through that process of understanding what the audit results are. Then they can cast a vote. When it goes beyond that to the full TV committee, to the board, for example, the staff is required to carry that forward. For example, if this is a close vote, let's say that the audit committee is divided, we're required to communicate upwards what the major issues are, both sides of the equation, so that the directors that end up voting on that, even though they don't use the product, they're given a full recitation. Sometimes this is pages and pages of information of what the key voting matters and considerations are. The staff is required to do that. So they are fed the context of that in preparation for their voting. If it's a non-controversial vote, Tracy, let's say it was unanimous, the audit committee, buyers and sellers, everybody thought, and the audit report says it's all in full compliance, that's not as intensely done. We basically have a short email. We tell people this was unanimous, non-controversial, no or hardly any non-compliance, and then it's passed up. And those are truly generally like real ratification votes where people just say, yeah, we agree. But when it's controversial, we pass the context forward.
Are your members paying all the same amount, or is it a tiered approach?
Every seat pays the same amount by design. However, you could think of it as kind of a tiered approach, because remember what I just described is that you can join at the brand identity level. So I described NBC stations can join, the TV network can join, Telemundo can join, their cable nets can join, Comcast could join, for example. So really, they could pay for as many as 6 membership seats, to where a standalone entity that only has one brand identity could just pays for 1 membership seat. So in a sense, that's tiered, but it's at the brand identity level. But at the brand identity level, everybody pays the same amount, which is, I'll just disclose, is roughly $18,000 a year. And and I have 170 members times $18,000. You know my budget for the year, because that is our
I'll have to do the
sole
math.
source. That's our sole source of funding, is membership dues. We don't earn any money off of anything else. We don't buy anything, sell anything else. We don't charge for anything else. So the one
That's 3
complexity,
million. That's 3,060,000 just for people
that's
who
my
need it.
budget.
Okay.
The one wrinkle I would throw in is when we were in a little skirmish a while back with a measurement service, and it got escalated to the Congress, and I had to go to Washington, testify in front of the House Oversight Committee and the Commerce Committee. Yeah, those were not fun. Someday I'll tell you stories. But what I would tell you is the government actually asked us a very interesting question. They said, well, what about a very small enterprise that may not be able to afford $18,000? Let's say it's a standalone radio station or something, and they still want to understand how Nielsen measures or something like that. How do they join MRC? So we said, wow, that's a very interesting thing, because the government says you should be an equal access organization. So we formed a second tier of dues called a small business dues. And those small businesses that have less than $10 million in gross revenue can join MRC for 1/2 dues. So they pay $9,000. And they can essentially, they get the exact same voting rights and rights in MRC as P&G has. So, as any other member, the rank and file. In fact, we don't even publish or tell people who's a small business member or large. Now, people that know financials, they could probably figure it out. But we don't publish who's large or small. We only have a handful of those, maybe around 10 or 15. But we have those two dues classes. Otherwise, everybody pays the same amount that has more than 10 million in gross revenue.
All right, I want to steer away from that slightly because I have a whole page full of more questions that I want to ask you. So I'm also curious about your collaboration with other organizations. If, for example, do you collaborate with the ANA? Because I know they're pushing for standardization, of course, on categories and transparency. And I'm wondering, how doesn't that overlap with your mission? And so how closely do you align with them, if at all? And could you be playing a role as the MRC in their desire to harmonize taxonomies across the advertiser landscape? Because I know that's going on. Actually, we'll be discussing that at TVOT.
Very interesting. Well, first of all, we collaborate extensively with the ANA. The ANA is a member of MRC, but that minimizes it. I mean, they do normally what every other member does. But on top of that, we work pretty extensively with the ANA in our standard setting areas. So the ANA has been very interested in promoting us doing certain types of standards. For example, they were highly supportive of us setting the cross-media measurement standard. They came to us and asked for that standard, as did the agencies. Because we also...
Before or after, was that before or after the introduction of Aquila?
Way before. We wrote that standard years before Aquila was introduced. And you could say it was the catalyst for what's going on in Europe, for example, with Origin and ISBA in the UK, what's going on in the US with Aquila, what's going on in Canada. They have a cross-media measurement project going on, what's going on in many countries. Most of that activity at least has in its foundation our standards that we wrote on cross-media measurement. ANA came to us a long time ago. That standard was issued, not a long time ago relative to Aquila, for example. I can tell you exactly what year, but I can't off the top of my head. But anyway, the ANA was supportive of that. they were supportive of something called Making Measurement Make Sense, which is an initiative that occurred in the digital industry years ago. It came about it drove the introduction of the viewable impression standard. The ANA has been super supportive of our invalid traffic and fraud standard. And most recently, the ANA helped support and drive forward the standard we wrote on outcomes measurement. So, one thing I'll tell you that I don't think I've told many people in this kind of a capacity is that beginning in 2026, maybe even towards the end of this year, we're initiating a new major standard on machine learning and AI, and how that crosses with the measurement area. There are a lot of areas. This would be a big, far-reaching standard. It might even be more than one document. Best practices, development of AI, how it gets modified and changed, how it migrates, rules, best practices for use and consideration of machine learning and AI. That's all going to be in that standard. I'm going to be approaching the ANA about that and the 4As about that.
Okay. I can't wait to see what you come up with, because the standards for AI systems are constantly evolving, and I mean, and then you're dealing with are you dealing with truth sets, or are you dealing with specific large language models? I mean, what
we deal with all that now.
How do you even find a grounding center to establish a standard for that?
Oh, we deal with it right now, Tracy. We audit things like brand safety at Google and Meta, and they use large natural language processing models. They use all kinds of things. We already audit this, and we have a lot of depth in understanding this. Everywhere we go, there are models. You audit Nielsen, they have models for identity. You audit ComScore, they have models. You audit VideoAmp, we have a new audit, emerging of VideoAmp. These are very central focuses. The whole area of identity has machine learning and AI wrapped into it. So
is OpenAI
this, but we'll be developing disclosure standards, practice standards, internal controls, and things like that as they specifically relate to measurement.
OpenAI is not in the advertising game yet, but have they contacted you, or do they?
No. No, and they're not a member, and we've never spoken to anybody there.
Okay, so back to Aquila for a second. There's still, I think, isn't there some tension between proprietary and open approaches? All of these different companies have different ways of dealing with cross-platform measurements, and a lot of these companies, are measurers themselves, and they don't necessarily want to give you their data. So how do you deal with that sort of conflict?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing is we're a little removed from it because we don't build these systems, we audit them. So there's a team at ANA and advertisers that have come into working groups and platforms, and there's also broadcast measurement kind of aspects to that. And all of that is sort of being arranged by a separate team, but we have standards that are in the middle of that. But you're correct that there's a lot of interests and complexities and agendas to sort out in that environment. The Aquila initiative has the power of the advertiser behind it, which is not trivial. And, it has a lot of support, not only among advertisers and agencies, but it has support among the platforms. And, there are some broadcast forces that are supportive, although largely there is tension with the broadcast environment, cable casters and broadcasters. But I mean, it's moving forward because there's a lot of sheer power and weight behind it. It's taken a long time, but it's a real initiative. We've been in it since the beginning as advisors, because they came to us and said, well, we want to build this based on your standards. So can you ride along with us and ensure that we're considering your standards appropriately? And then as it matures and comes forward, we would like to have Aquila accredited. Now, there are commercial enterprises that are trying to do cross media. For example, Nielsen has Nielsen One. They have Nielsen One ads, Nielsen One content. We're auditing Nielsen One ads right now, components of that.
How far are you into that? Like,
Fairly
when do you think
early,
that will?
fairly early in it, but Nielsen intends to drive Nielsen One ads forward to accreditation. It's a complex audit. But again, we're sort of neutral in their applying an assessment of whether it complies with our standards. We can do that with Nielsen. We can do that with Aquila. We can do that with ComScore, who has a product called CCR, and they're trying to measure cross media. They haven't submitted that product to us yet, but we could do it. VideoAmp, by its design, is a cross media measurement enterprise. So, they are right now talking about mostly submitting their linear processes to us, but that would eventually grow into cross media. We would do the same neutral assessment, whether it's a commercial enterprise, an industry organization driving it. We just do one thing. Are you in compliance with the standards? Can we audit and prove it? And if so, boom, you're accredited.
There any of these companies or others that you feel are closer to the mark, that you're excited about?
Well, I mean, I'm very excited about Aquila because it's being designed from the ground up to be compliant. So it has other challenges. I mean, it's like herding an entire industry together to cooperate. I mean, you described it, Tracy. There's a lot of tension in that equation. So you've got some very talented people, Bill Tucker, Jackson Baisley. You've got Josh Chasen, Kevin Svenningson. I don't know if you know Kevin, former Nielsen guy, very, very, very good. All of those people are like top-notch people, and they got other people that are, yeah,
Strong opinions, very
strong
strong.
opinions, strong people trying to get this going outright. Plus, you got support of a lot of the advertisers that are in the group. So I'm excited about that initiative. I'm very excited about what's going on in the UK in Origin. They're further along, and it's very good. They're trying to sort out what their key relationship is with Barb, and how they might contribute data. We're anxious. Barb is a member of MRC also, by the way. And as is ISBA. So we're again in the middle advising people about this, how to structure auditing. We wouldn't end up being the primary auditors of Origin like we would be Aquila, because that's really resident in the UK and they have their own audit structures to apply. We may audit platform contributions because we're the only people that audit like Google data and metadata that would come into the cross media system in Europe. Plus, you've got all these other countries. I'm excited about what Nielsen's doing. I'd really like to look at CCR. It's going to take time for me to look at VideoAmp, but we will do our level best to assess these. They're complex, especially the identity component, Tracy. Working that out, making sure that works, that it's well thought out. It's very challenging.
Do you want to go into that? Why it is challenging? Because I have follow-up questions.
Well, because it's highly modeled. There's no real readily available standard of truth. Like I can't go somewhere and say, oh, with this data, I definitively know somebody's identity. It doesn't usually come to it. So we require each of these services to have some component of a truth set. So for example, ComScore has processes. They use ACR data. They use surveys that they execute in the general population where they can tie identity to other things. They don't really have panels. VideoAmp has panels. For example, they use T-Vision not necessarily for measurement, but for the linkage of activity to identity as a training to help train identity models. Nielsen has a large panel they employ. Aquila has Kantar setting up a large panel to be the center of that. It's not panel centric measurement, but it's a calibration panel, and it's extensively used in the vid modeling process for identity.
I
So
also seen hyphometrics emerging a lot.
hyphometrics is emerging. We don't do a lot of work with hyphometrics. We'd like to. So if they watch the podcast, come and talk to me. We'd like to see what we can do together. But what I have heard them mentioned a lot in the context of possible alternatives to use for these processes.
Well, I'm definitely curious about the whole ACR thing because I know there's an initiative out there trying to really use ACR more aggressively. Is that technology reliable, in your opinion, for creating that sense of transparency, or do you think it's probably a problem still that it's too complicated? Because otherwise you're dealing with the walled gardens, you're dealing with a lot of privacy problems. Everybody's collecting all this GDPR data, holding it. You can't get access to it. It's so complicated. Like, what is the technology you're that might hold some promise? Do you think it's these new initiatives with
ACR holds a lot of promise, and it has one very significant promise in the US. It is one viable source of information on people that, are not cable oriented, that they're over the air households. What we
it
traditionally
bypasses
call.
identity problems, right? It bypasses identity to some extent. You don't have to worry about it. You're just collecting raw data.
Yeah, but you still at some point need to assign identity to that, even to ACR
Yeah.
households. But in terms of gathering data from OTA households, you can do it at scale with ACR data. Otherwise, you're reliant on a panel, which only a small percentage of panelists are like OTA. So you have to have a huge panel to measure OTA households properly, and that's not very cost effective. But ACR data gives you that glimpse into OTA households. So ACR data is reliable. It can be cleaned and used. There are some limitations, and that is there has to be monitoring in place so that you can recognize that content. And not every station is monitored in every market, etc. So there are holes in ACR data, and they're significant. The more that can be put to bed and cleaned, the better off ACR data will be. The vendors that are bringing that forward are like, and we're talking to them like we'd like to have all these vendors in membership. We have a couple of them now, but we'd like to have more because I think they are sort of like a centerpiece of the future of technology. The O and O's, the large TV set O and O's. Samsung, for example, is not a member of MRC.
Why why
That
wouldn't
would
they
be a
be?
great thing.
Why wouldn't they be?
I don't know the answer to that. I've been in contact with them. We've asked them, but they just haven't seen fit to join. Maybe they don't think we would provide value to them. I think we would. We would provide value in terms of gathering them all together and talking about how they can best leverage their technology, whether they do it individually or as a group, or if they participate with Nielsen, or if they participate with VideoAmp, or if they participate with OpenAP, or whatever they participate with. We can help it with that equation and validate it. So I think there's tremendous value, but convincing them sometimes can be hard. It's only $18,000.
Chump change.
Chump
Chump
change
change.
for Samsung.
Um, well, I know so there's an initiative going on. Ad ID is reared its head again, right? There's a lot of work with that. Are you following that at all?
Yes. Yeah, we're supporters of Ad ID, like not any formal sense, but we believe in the concept. We've written standards that have specifically mentioned asset identification being critical. Um, there are a lot of ways. I mean, the SIM did metadata initiatives and all this other stuff to help with asset identification. I participated. This was when Jane Clark was running SIM. I participated in that project. We collaborate with John Watts where we can. Um, these initiatives of asset identification are getting very important because these, ad assets and content assets are traveling between devices, and you got to be able to identify them wherever they go ubiquitously, and the ID tagging is pretty critical. The problem
Um,
is it all meshes with the back offices of the content creators, and it has to mesh, and sometimes they don't. Like those systems have inertia. Like NBC, I keep using NBC, but I might use anybody else. CBS has spent a lot of money on, their back office, on how they work with their content, how they label their content when they create it. And now I'm going to come forward and say, well, I've invented this ad ID. You must use this. They're like, well, we've already spent how many millions of dollars creating a system. So there's workflow issues and acceptance issues that are there. But asset identification is critical, just like it's a key challenge, just like privacy is a key challenge, just like identity is a key challenge.
Speaking of which, we've talked around this idea of all the multi-currencies. Everybody's aware that's going on, but eventually something has to work, kind of like quantum gravity. Somebody has to figure out the quantum gravity. That's a physics conundrum, but it's the same idea. And as much as something has to pan out as a consistent way to measure all of these things. So I'm curious, do you think there will be some legitimate currency? There'll be a merger, it'll be a fait accompli? Do you think the market will decide who they like because the company that's invented something all of a sudden, like an Amazon, or a Walmart Vizio, dominates the space? What do you think potentially might work out? I know that's asking you to prognosticate, but
Yeah, and
uh,
I have to be careful because I'm not allowed to favor anybody. So this comment isn't about favoritism. You mentioned Amazon. Amazon is a obviously a very large but super smart player in this business. Um, they can they can do stuff. They can do it fast. They can get it accredited. They're very good at it. Better than average. Uh, they're a smart player. They just don't have all the assets, but they could pull things together or align with other people to pull things together. Um, you know, Conventional measurement. So one principle I'll just throw out there, Tracy, is independent third party measurement still has merit. I mean, the game has changed in measurement. We have census like data assets that are being supplied by seller organizations. We're strapping identity on top of it that come from, identity companies like Experian or, TransUnion or whatever. So we got a lot of players in the space that have a lot of data and they want to get it validated, and it comes from them. I think there is merit to companies like VideoAmp, ComScore, Nielsen that get up every morning and all they think about is how they can do a good job measuring neutrally that don't own the media assets. I really think the marketplace is losing sight of that. And maybe I'm just an old guy, but independent measurement that doesn't have a vested interest, that isn't a walled garden measuring themselves, I believe still has merit. A lot of people trash IAS and Double Verify. I don't know if you know these companies. They're independent ad verification vendors. And, neither company is perfect, but they're independent and they do a pretty doggone good job and they have a lot of things accredited. They have merit as opposed to just putting your ad campaign out there and relying on whoever is out there counting the assets on their site to tell you what ran. You want to have some neutral third party view of it. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I think that's critical in the future for the business rather than all these self-measured assets coming forward exclusively. And believe me, we audit the self-measured assets too. I audit Google, I audit Meta, I audit, a lot of self-measured assets, and they have merit and they have reasoning why they're self-measured. But there's still a value to independent third-party measurement.
What do you think about biases in black box
About what?
systems? The fact that many measurement systems are powered by these opaque black box models, even though.
Oh, well, so I hate that. We have to have transparency for models if they impact advertising transactions. Sometimes that makes life complex. Clean rooms and all these technologies, privacy enabling technologies have to be used. But in general, I spend 8 waking hours a day or more, sometimes a lot more, combating that. I don't like black boxes. I don't like a lack of transparency. I don't accept it as an excuse that, we can't do this. There are ways to validate things that they work and give assurance to the outside world and not have a black box. So I stand diametrically opposed to that. Could I get any more definitive?
I don't know. I think Disney will, continue to do that because they can control their environment, because their ecosystem is so large. But yes. I want to also mention about co-viewing standards. I know that's something that's on your mind.
It is.
You mentioned T-Vision. Everybody's interested in that. People are joining each other to watch TV. Is there any way to standardize that? It seems to me very difficult. It would be extremely difficult to do. I just wanted to bring it up briefly.
Yeah, no, that's a very good call out, Tracy. It's becoming a more and more prominent issue in our industry because we're using large data sets, passively collected data without identity. And we know that there are situations where people congregate together to consume content and ads. And so in what's happening is, years ago, TV was measured by Nielsen and they had a panel and it was set and forget. Nielsen would tell you this is how many people are in the audience based on their people meters or whatever their other, even if it was a diary, you're supposed to be able to list who was in the audience, right? So people would rely on that. But today the world is a lot more complex. Even Nielsen has changed. Not even, Nielsen has changed where they're gathering large data, they're gathering streaming data in certain respects. All the other measures are doing the same thing. And that doesn't come with co-viewing assigned. You don't know how people are congregating, so you have to model it. You have to have some view. That's why companies like T-Vision and Hyphametrics are becoming prominent in this space because they at least have a swath of data where they have deterministic view of when people are congregating. They might be missing a lot. What if they do it in a bar? What if they're outside the household? There are.
How about when we're watching television and we call our daughter, who's in England at the moment because she's studying there, and she wants to see what we're watching, and we have to show her on FaceTime, reverse the camera. So to some extent, you're watching, at least in snippets, television using a second screen remotely in London. You see
That's
what
a
I'm saying?
very big thing. I mean, they're slinging things, and there's all kinds of things you can do, casting and whatever. I think that's the proper word, casting. But but these are all modeled approaches now. Don't forget the opposite side of the coin, Tracy, that there are people out there that tune their TV on for their cat, or they tune their TV on just for
Yes.
noise and they're not
Yes.
watching the TV. So there's
Yes.
tuning without viewers. And
Right.
then there are
Right.
viewers that are multiple to tuning instances. And all of that is modeled behavior, and it has to be audited and validated, and you have to have some standard in training data to do that. And that's why this is a very prominent issue to MRC, because we're in the middle of trying to validate those. And standards is a good idea. We already have some standards guidance that we can compile. That's what we're really thinking about doing, is creating a new document that takes from all the other standards that we've got and says, here's the cumulative total of our guidance on co-viewing. That would probably be a good thing for MRC to do. That's on our docket, actually.
I have to say that when there are fireworks or thunderstorms, I turn on the dog channel sometimes for my dog to help.
Yes.
I to I don't know, just so she can hear barking or something to distract her. Okay.
One of my
Um,
dogs has gotten older. He's like 11, and he didn't used to be this way, but now he freaks out when there's a storm. So it happens to dogs. I know it.
we have definitely done a long interview here, but I have like two more questions. One is that it's the consumer. The consumer has absolutely no idea what's going on. I know when I turn on a fast channel, I get 3 ads in a row, which drives me crazy
Oh,
these
it drives
days.
me crazy.
Drives me crazy. And it's like, does anybody know this is going on? Do they get a better deal? Maybe this is not something you can answer, but I'm wondering, and I need to ask more questions. How do you measure that? Do you measure it as one? Is it a blip? Is it they're getting a better deal? They're paying more for like what is happening here? And what can the consumers feel about all of this? Because I think they're feeling that that the TV doesn't know who they are, that they're being manipulated somehow. I mean, I feel like they're losing trust. How do you communicate to consumers potentially? Is that something on your docket, as you mentioned?
Communicating directly to consumers is not on our docket.
No, I know
Um,
it's not, but I mean, I'm asking a little bit more of a rhetorical question. Like, I
no,
think
no, I
somebody needs,
understand. Listen,
yeah.
I've been subjected to the same thing you described, and not only may there be a loss of trust, but there's a high degree of frustration. And at some point, I go, I don't care what that product is, I don't like it because it's just running commercial after commercial. And that's exactly the opposite of what an advertiser wants to have happen. That's why we wrote an outcome standard. That's why CTV is included in that standard. So understanding what happens with those ads and how consumers view it is one thing. Another thing is measuring it and understanding that you have that high frequency, and acting upon that in a targeting scenario is very challenging now in certain environments. And that has to be focused on and addressed by the buyers and sellers in some of these advanced TV environments. And Tracy, something you didn't mention, there's also brand safety. When you listen to
Yes.
people out there, they say, well, TV is a brand safe environment. And it's true. Linear TV is extremely safe environment. Everything that gets on the air is reviewed, looked at in advance. There are delays. There's all kinds of things that are in play. In CTV, it's a little bit different. I can, be watching SpongeBob and I can get an ad for, you know, ED, whatever. I can get all kinds of things, and the targeting is not optimal, and there should be brand safety considerations in those environments. So, there's a lot of work to do there. Some of it is centric on MRC, measurement, understanding frequency, etc., our standards, making sure there is guidance. And that's not all complete. But some of it is outside of our purview. It's business process, it's really how you use and leverage the research, how you target. But something has to be done because what you just referred to is a very large, widespread problem.
I think to some extent, I can see why people turn to YouTube. They get frustrated with all that on CTV. And is YouTube playing a large part these days in your consideration, or they stayed out of the discussions? You mentioned Google, but what about YouTube?
Google and YouTube, like we view them as the same entity. They have different teams that they bring to the table, but basically they're very collaborative with MRC. participate in our, it's generally stated, they participate in our standard setting process. They extensively get audited. We audit the audit of Google in total, which is inclusive of a lot of YouTube assets, is very large. It's one of our largest audits, most significant audits time wise. They're very deep into transparency. They're very deep into working with us in the standards area. And then they're not the only platform. There are other platforms too. But they're very collaborative, but that doesn't mean they're doing everything right. I mean, they have issues here and there with how they measure, how they communicate with customers, how they force customers to do certain things. I mean, they're just like any other big enterprise. They have imperfections. But in general, we view them as a very good actor with our process.
Right, good to know. The next 25 years, are you going to still be with the MRC?
25 years.
What's the next 5 years with the MRC? Is it the gold standard in 5 years? Are you going to stick with it? What's your hope? What is your hope for the future of the MRC?
Well, gosh, I see the MRC as a useful industry self-regulatory function going forward indefinitely. I don't see us going away. We are challenged by the environment constantly. I hope that we can crack our business model and figure out a way to grow a little bit better. We're working on that. I won't be here in 25 years. That's a funny joke. But it won't be a loss. Underneath me, we have Ron Pinelli, we have Larissa Oliveri, we have Shadi Hamdan, we have, Hannah Bolkar. We got people on the MRC staff. Heck, Ron is already like 10 times better than I am at this stuff. And we just brought in Shadi from E&Y, who's like an expert in currency measurement. He's an expert in machine learning and AI. Like, these guys are going to be so much better than me, and it needs
Too
to
modest,
be.
but I get it. That's nice
The
to hear
environment is
modesty.
challenging.
It's refreshing to hear modesty out in the market today. Believe me,
It's
everybody's
truth.
like, "I'm the
It's
greatest.
the
I'm the
truth.
best."
No. What I do is I listen and I learn. That's what I pride myself on. But this environment is becoming very, very technical. And that's why we brought in people into the MRC team. And we've been challenging every one of the 3 CPA firms that we use for years to bring in highly specialized people to help us with these things. So we got PhD people that are from the media industry that know modeling on audit teams at CPA firms. So we've made transitions to help with technology. Not George. It's not George.
Well, I really appreciate this very long, in-depth, candid interview. I think you guys aren't just, keeping score though, but you're really trying to help the rules get shaped in a trustworthy way and manage an entire industry and all the personalities. And I think you've got your job is larger than, being an accreditation company. You're kind of like an industry referee to some extent, right? Which is it's a bigger job. But anyway, thank you so much for all of your time.
Great questions, Tracy. Thank you for the interview, and I appreciate you giving me this much time.
Oh, thank you. All right. But don't go offline. I want to mention something, and thank you so much. I will be seeing you soon in December 3rd. And thanks to Bill out there and everything else. Keep going strong.
Thank you.
And I'm Tracy Swedlow, of course. You can go to the MRC. Your website is, I never can remember.
MediaRatingCouncil.org.
That's right. It's very hard to tag you on LinkedIn, by the way. It's hard. You have to spell it all out. You can't go MRC. All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Somehow MRC was taken. We'll see you.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.